Welcome to Brain Secrets in this, the age of the brain. Research is uncovering more and more about how the human brain functions. I call those bits of information brain secrets, and I love talking about them. Music has been part of human history since time immemorial. There is a reason. Music engages the entire brain in a way that differs from almost anything else. In fact, your brain is your most important musical instrument. When you are truly listening to music or singing or playing a musical instrument, your brain is completely engaged. It becomes difficult, if not impossible, to thoughtfully think about a different topic or subject. On set with me is a composer, arranger, vocalist, instrumentalist, discriminating listener, all wrapped up in one brain. We have authored several books together, including Music on the Brain. When we were researching for Music on the Brain, we identified multiple studies that showed the benefit of being exposed to music, especially the earlier the better, on the brain and on academic performance. I have brought a few of those references. Both of us, musicians, we come from very different musical genres. My background since the age of 3 was primarily classical piano. His background? He can tell you about that. My brain's opinion? He can do almost anything musically, which has made our collaboration musically enriching for me. Michael R. Hudson. Welcome to Brain Secrets, Michael.
It's nice to be here, Arlene.
It's really fun to talk to you about music. We're both musicians, but we have very different genres. You know, my history is classical piano for years and years and years and teaching piano. Your history, I think you can do anything you want musically.
Oh, you're just biased.
I am biased, but I don't mind being biased.
Okay. I appreciate the compliment.
So, thinking about the music you do you come from a musical family?
Actually, I do. My mother sang, my grandmother sang, and all of my siblings have some level of musical affinity. Yeah.
So, what drew you to a career in music? Now, it's not the only thing you do, but you do a lot with music.
What drew me is the belief that when you do something you love, then that's your calling. And of course, went to college and studied the sciences, which I enjoyed. But music, I was always something that I most enjoyed. And so it just seemed like a perfect segue for me.
And that's what I think people need to figure out, because what your brain does well and easily is your giftedness. Now, you do have to hone, your skills, but we're all born with skills. When you and I were writing Music on the Brain, we did a lot of research. And when we talked about doing this segment, I went and pulled a few of the pieces of research that we identified so that we could talk about that a little bit. Now, you mentioned that you like the sciences and so on, but music always called you. Well, here is one of the amazing pieces of research we found.
Okay.
Think of music and math as first cousins. Probably physics and science as well. Children who are immersed in music tend to do better scholastically, including mathematics. Music emerges from principles found in physics and mathematics. Competent composers have pointed out that music composition is basically a mathematical exercise.
Wow.
Many scientists were and are also musicians.
Interesting.
Einstein is a good example of that. So what's your earliest musical memory?
I must have been 3 or 4, and my first musical experience was the jingle to Popeye the Sailor Man. And that was just, I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. And that was my first, as a vocalist. But my first true musical experience was my mother singing to me, mostly Negro spirituals. But before I can utter a word or a musical note, she was singing to me.
We know from research that music is connected to memory. You told me one time, which I'd like you to reiterate, that when you, and I don't remember exactly how we got discussing it, but we talked about how people remember events in their lives.
Yeah.
And you had a really interesting take on that. You said something about if...
Oh, yeah. I remember now.
If you ask somebody what happened on a certain event.
Oh, yeah. I said that if you were to ask people to recall their most momentous event, whether it's emotional or celebratory, and if you would ask them what was the prevalent film at that time, they'd have a hard time. They'd have to think about it. But if you ask them what was the music associated with that event, they know immediately. And I think that was the power, the lasting power of music on the brain and the emotions aspect of it.
You know, we know that at some level. I mean, music is everywhere in our culture. It's at weddings, it's at funerals, it's at graduations, it's at sports events. You know, when I've looked at some of the old talkies where there was no sound,
Right.
just the pianist in there playing, and of course...
The subtitling?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you add the music. The story is entirely different.
It's true.
The actors could have been doing the very same motions, and you change the music, and you get a whole different picture.
Absolutely.
It's amazing
It's
to me.
absolutely
And I
true.
love studying it. Now here's another piece of information we uncovered. When you link information with music and the children learn to sing it, learning goes quickly and often much more easily and is more likely to be recalled. So you talked about the Popeye jingle.
Yeah.
Well, growing up in Canada, I learned a lot of things by music. I learned the alphabet by music when I was very, very young, the alphabet song.
Absolutely.
And any time that I could learn something with a musical context, I tended to remember it. My particular brain is a big picture brain. And it's sometimes difficult for me to remember, you know, specific little details. I've got the picture. And sometimes that's unfortunate because I will see clearly in my mind something I need to do. And I'll think I've done it.
Wow.
And then the next day somebody will say, you know, I'm waiting for this for you. And I said, I sent that yesterday. And I go back to my computer.
It's still there.
And it's sitting there.
Right.
And because I saw it in my mind and never pressed start, it's still sitting there.
Right.
It's just amazing. Let me read one more of these.
Please.
Infants and babies who are exposed to music on a regular basis, who are sung to, and who learn to sing, those who learn to play an instrument, and so on, show measurably learning advantages when they start kindergarten and school.
It's interesting.
And one of the things that I worry about for the years as I was a school nurse is that when the budget tends to get tight,
That's true.
what are the first things they start cutting?
Yeah,
Music.
that's true.
And music is just so integral a part of learning. The two go together. In fact, the other things that we were very clear about co-authoring this book on music was that music engages the entire brain in a way that very few, if any, other particular genres do. So that if you are really, really listening to music, it's hard for you, if not impossible, to think about an entirely different subject. So it makes complete sense that if you are hearing music and the information is tied to it with words as in a song, it's a slam dunk.
Yeah.
You're going to remember it. So, with your experience with music and everything you've done, if a parent comes to you and says, what could I really do to give my child an academic advantage? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to expose their children to music at an early age. There is something innocuous about music, it's subliminal, that sort of becomes indigenous in their soul, in their spirits. And it's easy to access. Music is so easy to be a part of the human experience. And if you involve your children at an early age in some form of music, then I think it elevates and expands their whole creative spectrum. And the thing about music is, well, in that expansion of the creative expansion, it makes anything possible. It becomes no longer a finite possibility, it becomes infinite. And that's what music does.
I wish more families understood that. You were fortunate, Michael, to have your mother sing to you. We know from current research that if you want your child to learn to speak early, well, and so on, the minute they're born, it's talk, 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 sing, sing, sing. Expose them to music because it builds the brain in a different way. I know I've got a quote about that. Music changes the brain. It has the capability of devoting more space to music as the need arises. So if you play one instrument, you've got that loaded in part of the brain. You add another instrument, they'll add more brain space, and the brain will prune highways that aren't being used and convert it to something else. So I know you play a number of instruments. I know you do drums. I know you've done guitar. I know you've done piano. You did something else you told me once that I've forgotten, a brass.
Yeah, used to play the baritone horn.
The baritone horn, all right. So it'd be really interesting to take a look at your brain and see where in the brain it has built those highways for you to do that. It's very much the same as teaching a child a second language. You know, when a child is born, it is capable of learning 3 separate, distinct languages, as long as, preferably, a different person always speaks that same language to them. And they can become multilingual,
Interesting.
Very, very quickly. So, for example, corpus callosum, you've got 2 hemispheres of the brain. They're connected by multiple bridges. The largest of those bridges is called the corpus callosum. It is the largest band of horizontal connecting axon fibers in the brain. Now, the size of the corpus callosum, and we only know this now because we've got brain scans, it's not just observational. The size of the corpus callosum, that largest bridge, can increase by 25%. In the brains of children who start studying music early in life, especially before the age of 7 or 8, although the earlier, the better.
Right.
So my earliest recollection, my mother reportedly played the piano for 30 minutes every day while she was pregnant with me. She sang for 30 minutes, and she read to me for 30 minutes. I don't know how she knew to do that, because back in the late 1800s, when I arrived on this planet, we didn't have that kind of research. My earliest recollection is falling asleep with her playing the piano.
Wow.
And they say by the age of 3, I was begging for a piano.
Wow.
Which is interesting to me because I don't remember begging for it, but I remember the total joy I felt when a piano moved into our house.
Wow.
I mean, it changed my life. So here's one more that I want to read because I think this is so interesting. Music engages the whole brain, we know that. When the brain listens to music, think of it as a party going on inside your skull. When you play an instrument, however, the fireworks start.
Wow.
This becomes for the brain the equivalent of a full body workout. This is because the occipital, at the back of the brain that has to do with vision, the temporal lobes that have to do with hearing, and the parietal lobes that have to do with muscle movements and so on, become totally engaged with the instrument.
Wow.
So the whole thing is pretty exciting. So in a couple of words, how would you say music has impacted your life personally and professionally?
Well, personally, it's affected my life because I receive such enjoyment for creating it, but beyond my personal perceptions of it, I see the manifestation of my children. I sang it to them at a very young age, and they are super creative, making films at an early age, and my son has perfect pitch. And when I see how music has affected their lives, then it sort of gives me a sense of accomplishment in a weird way. Like I might have passed those musical affinities to them.
You might have?
Yeah, well, and but professionally, it's been rewarding. You know, it's nothing like generating a very comfortable living doing something that you would do for free. So I think that's my
Well, I certainly have appreciated that when we've written books together and decided to have musical interludes, and then you send me, the raw take, the first take. The first thing I listen for is, what has he done for music between the chapters?
Yeah.
And that's really exciting for me. Okay, so one more.
Okay, please.
Well, a quick one and then one more. Children who become involved in singing, join a choir, etc., perform music, tend to be at much lower risk for becoming involved with groups associated with undesirable behaviors. And gangs would be one of those undesirable groups. That's huge.
It is.
That's where I think parents need to put their time and money. Okay, most brains are born with an average capacity of musical ability. Almost all can sing. Babies begin babbling, their form of singing, at about age 2 months, more especially if their parents have sung to them. This ability can be honed with opportunity and choice. The brain can develop and exhibit specific musical skills. Do you prefer to be a listener? Fine. the brain can learn to be a sensitive and discriminating listener.
Wow. Very
So,
profound.
this reinforces for me as well that what we're doing is worthwhile.
It is.
Michael, it
It
really is. Everybody won't get it. Everybody won't choose to do it, but some will. And for them, it can change their whole life.
Generationally.
Generationally. So thank you again for being on Brain Secrets with me. I appreciate it, Michael.
I always enjoy talking to you, not only about the creative aspect, but the scientific perspective as well. And I love the way we've tied it in, brain and music, as a composite, but a collective.
Because it is tied
It
together.
is. It is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This wraps up another episode of Brain Secrets. My thanks to Michael R. Hudson and to you for watching. Have you given your brain the gift of music? It can be healing. It changes your brain, grows communicating projections on the neurons, creates new neuronal pathways, triggers the brain reward system to release dopamine, the feel better chemical, and much more. There are so many ways your brain can connect with music. And who knows what might happen? Your brain may already know where that could take you. Collaborate with it to figure that out. That's the secret.